I love another man. I can't accept this ring. My girlfriend rejected me in front of everyone after years of living off me without paying a dime. So I kicked her out and canceled all her cards. It was at the Vetsa restaurant, in front of 30 people who had come to celebrate what should have been our engagement. Natalia took the blue velvet box, barely opened it, looked at the diamond ring that had cost me 6 months of savings, and with a smile that seemed like pity, said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sebastian, you're a wonderful man, but I can't accept this. My heart belongs to someone else." The silence was so deep I could hear the clinking of glasses at the table in the back. My mother dropped her napkin. My sister opened her mouth without being able to say a word. Natalia's friends exchanged knowing glances, as if they had been waiting for that moment. What none of them knew in that instant was that I had discovered her betrayal 3 days earlier. I had seen the messages on her phone when she left it in the living room while she showered. Conversations with Rodrigo, a college friend who turned out to be much more than that. Words that described secret encounters. Laughter about how convenient it was to live with me without paying for anything. Plans to wait until after the wedding to get divorced and keep half of my assets. I read every message with a calm that surprised me. I didn't feel anger at that moment, just absolute clarity about what I had to do. I took screenshots, contacted my lawyer, and organized that engagement dinner knowing exactly how it would end. Because if Natalia wanted a dramatic setting for her rejection, I would give her one she would never forget. I'm Sebastian Nunez. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a project manager at a technology company. For 3 years, Natalia Morales was my partner, my confidant, the person I trusted most in this world. We met at a business conference where she worked as an event coordinator. She was charming, funny, with that contagious laugh that lit up any room. After 6 months of dating, I proposed she move into my apartment. She had mentioned problems with her roommate, difficulties paying the rent for her small studio. "Just until I find something better," she had said. That was 2.5 years ago. She never paid a single peso of rent, utilities, or food. I covered everything, happy to do it because I thought we were building a future together. After her public rejection at the restaurant, Natalia expected me to beg, to make a scene, to ask her who this other man was who had conquered her heart. Instead, I closed the ring box with a soft click that resonated in the tense silence. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and said in a voice so calm that even I was surprised, "I understand. Thank you for your honesty." Then I turned to everyone present and added, "I'm sorry to have made you come in vain. The dinner is paid for. Please enjoy the evening." I walked to the exit without looking back, ignoring the whispers that were beginning to fill the room, my mother's voice calling me, Natalia's hurried steps trying to catch up with me. In the parking lot, I took out my phone and made 3 quick calls. The first to my bank to cancel the 2 additional credit cards I had added to my account in Natalia's name. The second to my lawyer, confirming that he should proceed with everything we had discussed. The third to an emergency locksmith who charged me double for working on a Friday night, but who promised to be at my apartment in less than an hour. As I drove back home, Natalia called me 11 times. I didn't answer any. The messages started arriving one after another. "Sebastian, we need to talk. It wasn't my intention to hurt you like that. Please, at least listen to me. This is very dramatic, don't you think?" Each message confirmed that I had made the right decision. I arrived at the apartment before her. It was a penthouse on the 12th floor of a modern building in the business district with a panoramic view of the city. I had bought it 4 years ago when I got my promotion. It was my pride, my refuge, the place where I had imagined building a family. Natalia had decorated it to her liking, filling it with unnecessary cushions, expensive scented candles, and that white sofa that I hated, but that she insisted on buying with my card. While I waited for the locksmith, I began to pack Natalia's belongings into the same Louis Vuitton suitcases I had given her on our anniversary. Clothes, shoes, makeup, jewelry, everything went into those suitcases with mechanical efficiency. The locksmith arrived exactly 52 minutes later. He was an older man, with rough hands and a curious look. "Relationship problems?" he asked as he began to change the main lock. "You could say that," I replied. I didn't elaborate further, and he didn't ask. In 30 minutes, the locks were changed. I gave him a generous tip and 3 sets of new keys. One for me, one for my mother, and a spare one. Natalia would no longer have access to my home. I placed the suitcases in the hallway, just outside the door. Next to them, I left a handwritten note. Your belongings are here. Don't try to enter. The keys no longer work. May you be happy with your true love. Natalia arrived at the building 40 minutes later. I heard the doorbell ring insistently. Then the knocks on the door. Sebastian, open this door right now. Her voice had lost all the sweetness she usually used. Now it sounded shrill, desperate. You can't kick me out of my house like this. I activated the intercom without opening. This apartment's in my name. You never paid rent. Legally, you're a guest who is no longer welcome. Your things are outside. I suggest you call Rodrigo to help you with the suitcases. The silence that followed was delicious. How do you know? She began to say, but I cut off the communication. The knocks intensified. Sebastian, this is ridiculous. We have to talk like adults. I didn't answer. I just turned up the volume of the music and poured myself a whiskey. The neighbors began to complain about the noise. The building's concierge knocked on my door. Mr. Nunez, your guest causing a disturbance. Do you want me to call security? Please, I replied with a smile. 2 security guards arrived in less than 5 minutes. From the peephole of the door, I watched as they politely explained to Natalia that she had to leave the building or she would face charges for disturbing the peace. She tried to use her usual charm, that flirty smile that always worked with men. But the guards weren't my foolish friends who fell for her. They were professionals doing their job. One of them took the suitcases and motioned for her to follow him to the elevator. Before leaving, Natalia shouted one last time. You're going to regret this, Sebastian. Nobody treats me like this. That night, while she was looking for a place to sleep, I slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel sadness, just a deep relief of having eliminated a lie from my life before it was too late. The next day, when I woke up and saw the city illuminated by the morning sun, I knew I had made the right decision. My phone had 37 messages from Natalia, 12 from her mother, and several from mutual friends asking what had happened. I didn't answer any. Instead, I made coffee, had a quiet breakfast on my balcony, without anyone interrupting me, and waited for the real consequences of her actions to begin. Because canceling the cards and changing the locks was just the beginning of what Natalia was about to discover. On Monday morning, Natalia discovered that her credit cards had been declined. I knew because my phone exploded with furious calls and messages. I was in a work meeting when the messages started coming one after another. You canceled my cards. Seriously? I have pending purchases, Sebastian. This is financial abuse. I'm going to sue you for this. Each message was more desperate than the last. Apparently, Natalia had tried to pay for the hotel where she was staying, and the card was declined in front of the receptionist. The humiliation she felt at that moment must have been equivalent to what I experienced when she rejected me in front of 30 people. The difference is that I didn't seek it out. She chose that public stage for her betrayal. During lunch, my lawyer called me with news. The screenshots you sent me are enough to prove she was planning marital fraud, explained Ricardo Zamora, my lawyer for 5 years. The messages where she specifically mentions waiting until after the wedding to get divorced and keep your assets constitute evidence of fraudulent intent. If she tries to sue you for anything, we have enough ammunition to countersue. This gave me an additional sense of peace. Natalia had not only destroyed our relationship with her infidelity, but she had also planned to rob me using marriage laws. The manipulation had been calculated, cold, completely premeditated. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visit at my office. Rodrigo Mendoza appeared at the reception asking to speak with me. My assistant Clara, a 50-year-old woman with a maternal instinct, called me with concern. There's a man here who says he's your girlfriend's friend. He seems upset. Do you want me to call security? No, let him in, I replied. I was curious to meet the man for whom Natalia had decided to destroy 3 years of a relationship. Rodrigo entered my office with that arrogant confidence of someone who thinks he holds all the cards. He was shorter than me, with an expensive haircut and designer clothes that had probably also been paid for by some naive woman. We need to talk about Natalia, he said without even introducing himself formally. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. I have nothing to talk to you about regarding my ex-girlfriend. The word ex seemed to surprise him. Look, I know you're hurt. He began with a condescending tone that made me clench my jaw. But what you did last night was excessive. Natalia's devastated. You left her without a home, without money, without anything. Natalia has a job, I replied calmly. Or she did. I don't know if she still has it after missing today to solve her housing crisis. Rodrigo took a step toward my desk. Don't be cynical. She lived with you for 3 years. That gives her rights. Rights, I repeated with a dry laugh. Rights to live for free in my apartment while planning to marry me, to then divorce me and keep half of my assets? Those rights. Rodrigo's expression changed. The confidence evaporated, replaced by discomfort. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do. I took out my phone and opened the screenshots. Here are the messages where you two discuss exactly that plan, where Natalia tells you that Sebastian is so predictable he'll never suspect anything. Where you advise her to hold on for another year after the wedding so the division of assets is juicier. Should I refresh your memory, or do you want me to read the messages out loud? Rodrigo visibly paled. That's an invasion of privacy. That's evidence of marital fraud, I corrected. And my lawyer already has certified copies. So if you're here to threaten me or ask me to reconsider my decision, you're wasting your time and mine. Rodrigo tried to regain some composure. Natalia loved you. That has to count for something. Natalia loved me so much that she cheated on me for months, made me spend thousands of pesos on a ring she publicly rejected, and planned to marry me just to rob me, I listed coldly. Forgive me if I don't share your romantic definition of love. We all make mistakes, he insisted. The difference between a mistake and a calculated plan is intent, I replied. Natalia didn't make a mistake. She executed a strategy. And now she's facing the consequences. If you care so much about her, offer her your apartment. Oh, wait, you live with your mother, right? I read that in the messages. How convenient that Natalia had a secret boyfriend who never had to pay for anything because I did it for him. The blow hit its mark. Rodrigo clenched his fists. You don't know anything about my situation. I know enough. I stood up, indicating the conversation was over. Now if you have nothing else to add, I have work to do. The door is the way you came in. Rodrigo didn't move immediately. Natalia's talking about going to the media, about telling her side of the story. Excellent. I smiled humorlessly. Let her. I have documented evidence of everything. Messages, screenshots, witnesses who saw her reject me publicly. What does she have? A victim story where the bad man left her without her parasitic lifestyle. Go ahead. The media will love to contrast her narrative with the truth. Rodrigo finally retreated, defeated. The door closed behind him with a slam that reflected his frustration. That night my mother came to visit me at the apartment. Teresa N. was a 55-year-old retired elementary school teacher with that maternal instinct that detected problems from miles away. She brought a pot of my favorite food, beef stew with potatoes. I know you've been eating nothing but fast food, she said as she heated the food in my kitchen. Your father would have been proud of how you handled the situation on Friday. My father had passed away 5 years ago from a heart attack. His last conversation with me had been about never tolerating disrespect, especially from people who claimed to love you. Dad taught me well, I replied. But I know you're worried. I can see it on your face. My mother sighed as she served 2 plates. I'm not worried about your decision. I never really liked that girl. There was always something calculating about her. What worries me is how you really are, behind all that calm. I took a moment before answering. Honestly, Mom, I feel relieved. Yes, the betrayal hurts. It hurts to know that 3 years were a lie. But it hurts a lot less than if I had discovered all this after getting married, when she would have had legal rights to my assets. My mother nodded, placing her hand on mine. Your father used to say there are 2 types of pain, the one that destroys you and the one that builds you. You chose the second one. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only exists between people who know each other deeply. The next day, social media exploded. Natalia had posted a story on Instagram where she presented herself as the victim of a controlling man who left her with nothing overnight. The post included a photo of her crying with a dramatic text about economic abuse and emotional manipulation. Within hours, she had hundreds of supportive comments from people who didn't know the full story. You're so brave for sharing this. Men like that are the worst. You deserve justice. It was predictable. Natalia had always been an expert at managing her public image. What I didn't expect was my response. I didn't post anything on my social media. Instead, I sent a private message to each of the 30 people who had been at the restaurant on Friday. The message included the screenshots of the conversations between Natalia and Rodrigo, with dates and times clearly visible. "This is the full truth of what happened," I wrote. "I'm not asking you to take sides, just to know the facts before you form an opinion." I also attached the credit card receipt showing all the expenses Natalia had made in the last 6 months. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, weekend trips, all paid for with my money while she planned her betrayal. The effect was immediate. Several of those 30 witnesses shared the information with others. Natalia's narrative began to publicly crumble. Comments on her post started to change tone. "Why don't you tell the part where you were cheating on him? My cousin was at that restaurant. She says you rejected his ring publicly. Living for free in someone's apartment isn't a right." Natalia deleted the post in less than 3 hours, but the damage to her reputation was already done. Screenshots of her original post were circulating everywhere along with the responses that contradicted her. On Wednesday, I received a call from Natalia's mother. Monica Morales was a 60-year-old woman who had always treated me with exaggerated deference, probably because I financed her daughter's lifestyle. "Sebastian, please, I need to talk to you about Natalia." Her voice sounded tired. "She's devastated. She's staying at my house and cries every night. Don't you think you've been too hard on her?" I took a deep breath before answering. "Mrs. Monica, with all due respect, your daughter cheated on me for months, planned to marry me just to rob me, and rejected me publicly in the most humiliating way possible. Exactly what part of my reaction do you consider too hard?" There was a long silence. "Natalia made mistakes, I admit it. But you loved her. Love means forgiving. Love also means respect," I retorted. "And Natalia showed that she never respected me. I'm not going to reward her for her betrayal by allowing her to continue living at my expense." "She has nowhere to go," Monica insisted. "She has a job. She has friends. She has Rodrigo, her great true love. Let him help her now." "Rodrigo has no money," Monica blurted out without thinking, revealing more than she intended. "Exactly," I replied. "That's why Natalia kept me as her financial backup while she explored her romantic options. That plan is over. I'm sorry, Mrs. Monica, but this conversation isn't going to change anything. Have a good day." I hung up before she could continue. On Thursday afternoon, as I was leaving a meeting, I found Natalia waiting for me in the parking lot of my office building. She looked different. The perfect makeup was gone, replaced by deep dark circles. The designer clothes had been swapped for jeans and a simple sweatshirt. For the first time in 3 years, I saw her without all the layers of artifice she normally wore. "We need to talk," she said as I approached my car. "We have nothing to talk about," I replied, taking out my keys. "Sebastian, please." Her voice broke. "I made a terrible mistake, I know. But I don't deserve this. You left me with nothing. I left you with exactly what you brought into my life." I corrected. "Nothing. Because that's what you contributed for 3 years. Nothing, except lies and plans to rob me." Natalia started to cry. These weren't crocodile tears. This time they were real tears from someone who finally understood the consequences of her actions. "I broke up with Rodrigo," she sobbed. "I realized it was a mistake, that you were the right one all along." "How convenient," I replied without a hint of sympathy. "You broke up with him right when you found out he can't support you in the lifestyle you got used to at my expense." "It's not like that," she protested. "I realized I really love you." "Natalia," I said wearily, "you don't love me. You love what I represented: financial security, stability, a luxurious apartment. But you never loved me. If you had, you wouldn't have planned to rob me. You wouldn't have cheated on me, and you definitely wouldn't have humiliated me publicly." "What do you want me to do?" she asked desperately. "Grovel? Beg? I don't want anything from you," I replied honestly. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You chose to betray me. You chose to reject me publicly. You chose to plan marital fraud. Now you're living the consequences of those choices. It wasn't me who left you with nothing. You put yourself in this situation." "But we lived together for 3 years," she insisted. "That has to mean something." "It meant something," I admitted. "Until I read your messages with Rodrigo, until I saw how you laughed at how predictable I was, until I discovered that every tender moment, every word of love, every plan for the future was part of your strategy to rob me. That changed everything." Natalia took a step toward me. "If you give me another chance, I swear I'll—" "No," I interrupted firmly. There are no second chances for calculated betrayal. There's no coming back after what you did. Now get away from my car. I have things to do. I got into the vehicle while she continued to cry outside. I started the engine and drove away without looking back in the rearview mirror. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel pity. I just felt that I had closed a painful chapter of my life and was ready to start a new one where I wouldn't allow anyone to use me that way ever again. On Friday, exactly 1 week after the public rejection at the restaurant, I received a legal notice. Natalia had hired a lawyer and was suing me for illegal eviction and withholding of property. The lawsuit alleged that she had lived in my apartment for more than 2 years, which gave her residency rights, and that I couldn't just kick her out without a formal legal process. Additionally, she claimed that several items in the apartment had been purchased with shared funds and therefore partially belonged to her. The amount she was demanding was $50,000 for emotional and material damages. I immediately called Ricardo, my lawyer, who after reading the lawsuit let out a laugh. "This is legal garbage," Ricardo declared with professional amusement. "First, she never paid rent, which is documented. There's no lease, no proof of financial contribution, nothing to establish tenant rights. Second, the shared funds she mentions don't exist because all purchases were made with your credit cards, in your name, with your money. We have statements to prove it. Third, and this is the best part, her claim for emotional damages completely falls apart when we present evidence of her infidelity and her marital fraud plan. In fact, this gives us the perfect opportunity to countersue." "Countersue for what?" I asked, intrigued. Ricardo smiled in that way only lawyers with a winning case can smile. "For fraud, for misappropriation of resources, for damage to your reputation with her social media posts. We can argue that she lived under false pretenses on your property, consuming your resources while maintaining an extramarital affair and planning a fraudulent marriage. The messages you have are pure gold, Sebastian. They not only defend your case, but they completely destroy hers. Her lawyer made a colossal mistake filing this lawsuit. Now we have legal justification to make all the details of her betrayal public in official court documents." The countersuit was filed the following Monday. Ricardo was meticulous and ruthless in his wording. The document detailed the entire relationship chronologically, including specific dates of expenses I had covered, evidence that Natalia never contributed financially, complete transcripts of the messages between her and Rodrigo where they discussed their marital fraud plan, and testimonies from the 30 witnesses present at the restaurant who had seen the public rejection. The countersuit demanded $120,000 for emotional damages, defamation of character, and fraud. More importantly, it requested a court order prohibiting Natalia from contacting me in any way. Natalia's reaction was predictable. My phone exploded with hysterical calls and messages. $10,000. Are you crazy? She screamed in one of the voicemails. I don't have that kind of money. This is pure revenge. No, this is justice. I replied via text message. You initiated a legal process. I simply responded with documented truth. If you didn't want your actions to be legally exposed, you shouldn't have sued. My lawyer says this is harassment, she wrote. Your lawyer is trying to save himself because he took on a losing case, I retorted. Ricardo showed me the legal precedents. You have no basis for your claim. Withdraw it now, and I'll withdraw the countersuit. Continue, and we'll both go to court, where every detail of your betrayal will be on permanent public record. You decide. While all this was happening in the legal sphere, my personal life was beginning to rebuild. My friends, who had been in initial shock after the restaurant incident, began to show their support in tangible ways. My best friend since college, Fernando Suarez, organized a bar outing on Wednesday. You need to get out of that apartment full of memories, he insisted. You need to remember there's life after Natalia. We ended up at a sports bar watching soccer, surrounded by other friends who shared anecdotes about their own difficult breakups. It was therapeutic in a way I hadn't expected. You know what's ironic? Fernando commented as we drank beer. Natalia always acted like she was doing you a favor by being with you, like you were lucky to have her. But the reality is, she was the lucky one. She had a man who treated her well, who supported her, who was willing to marry her. And she threw it all away for a guy who lives with his mom. The others laughed, but there was truth in his words. Natalia had had something real, and she had destroyed it for a fantasy. The worst part is she'll probably never get it, I added. In her mind, She's the victim. I'm the villain who left her with nothing. She'll never take responsibility for her own choices. That week also brought unexpected revelations about Natalia that I was unaware of. A former co-worker of hers, Patricia Rivas, contacted me on LinkedIn with disturbing information. I know this is weird, but I felt you should know, her message began. I worked with Natalia 2 years ago at the event agency. She was fired for using the corporate card for personal expenses. She bought clothes and paid for dinners with fictitious clients. The company didn't sue her because she paid the money back and signed a confidentiality agreement. But everyone in the office knew what she had done. When I saw what she posted on social media about you, I felt people should know her pattern of behavior. Patricia's information added a new dimension to my understanding of Natalia. It hadn't just been an impulsive infidelity or a lapse in judgment. It was a pattern of behavior. Natalia had a history of using other people's resources for her personal benefit without remorse. I hadn't been her first victim, just the most recent. I shared this information with Ricardo, who added it to the case file. This establishes a pattern of fraudulent conduct, he explained. If her lawyer is even minimally competent, he'll advise her to withdraw the lawsuit immediately. Every day she continues with this, the more evidence we accumulate against her. On Thursday, I received an unexpected call from Rodrigo. His voice sounded defeated, completely different from the arrogance he had shown in my office days before. I need you to know that Natalia lied to me too, he began without preamble. She told me you were abusive, controlling, that you had her financially trapped. She made me believe I was rescuing her from a toxic relationship. She never told me she was planning to marry you to then get divorced and keep your money. When I read those messages you shared with the restaurant witnesses, I realized she used me just as much as she used you. Why are you calling to tell me this? I asked skeptically. Because I broke up with her, Rodrigo replied. And because her lawyer contacted me to testify in her favor, saying you were jealous and possessive, that's why you kicked her out. But I'm not going to lie in court. She's used me enough. I called to offer to testify in your favor if you need it. I can confirm that she planned the marital fraud because I was in those conversations. I know it sounds weird coming from me, but Natalia deceived us both in different ways. The difference is, you were smart enough to figure it out before you married her. Rodrigo's offer took me by surprise. I passed his contact information to Ricardo, who was enthusiastic. A testimony from the repentant accomplice is extremely valuable, my lawyer explained. It completely destroys any narrative Natalia tries to build about being an innocent victim. If Rodrigo testifies that she planned the fraud, that she lied to him about your character, that she manipulated him too, Natalia's case completely falls apart. I was beginning to understand that Natalia had not only lost an apartment and credit cards, she had lost allies, credibility, and any moral ground to present herself as a victim. On Friday night, 2 weeks after the rejection at the restaurant, I decided to do something I had been putting off, completely clean the apartment of any trace of Natalia. My sister Camila, 25 and a psychology student, came to help me. As we packed up the last items Natalia had left behind, small things I had overlooked the night I kicked her out, Camila asked me a direct question. Do you miss her? I paused with a decorative pillow in my hands. One of those Natalia had insisted on buying even though I found them uncomfortable and useless. I miss the idea of her, I replied after thinking. I miss the illusion of having a partner, of building something with someone. But the real Natalia, the woman who cheated on me and planned to rob me, I don't miss her at all. In fact, I'm relieved she's gone before she could do more damage. Camila nodded as she folded a blanket. Mom was worried you'd close yourself off emotionally after this, but I think you're handling it in the healthiest way possible. You set boundaries, you stood up for yourself, you didn't let yourself be manipulated. Dad would be proud. Her words comforted me more than I expected. That same night, as Camila and I were tidying up the apartment, a message arrived from Natalia's lawyer. The tone was completely different from the original lawsuit. It requested a meeting to discuss terms for an amicable resolution of the legal conflict. Ricardo translated it for me. They want to negotiate because they know they're going to lose. Natalia's lawyer finally realized he took on an unwinnable case. Now he wants to minimize the damage before this goes to court and his client is publicly humiliated on permanent judicial record. What do you suggest? I asked. That you accept the meeting, but hold your position. They withdraw their lawsuit. You withdraw the countersuit. a mutual no-contact agreement is signed, and everyone moves on with their lives. No money involved in either direction. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday at Ricardo's offices. It would be the first time I'd seen Natalia face-to-face since the parking lot of my office, and I didn't know what to expect. Part of me anticipated more drama, more tears, more attempts at manipulation. But another part of me, the part that had grown and matured through this painful experience, was prepared for anything. I had learned that betrayal revealed people's true character, and Natalia had shown her true colors repeatedly. There were no illusions left, no hopes of reconciliation, no room for emotional negotiation. All that remained was to legally close this chapter and move on with my life. On Sunday, the day before the legal meeting, I did something I had avoided for 2 weeks. I thoroughly reviewed all the photographs and memories of my relationship with Natalia. Travel photos, screenshots of tender conversations, videos of happy moments. It was all there, documenting 3 years of what I thought was real love. As I looked at them, I tried to identify warning signs I had missed. Were there hints of her betrayal from the beginning, or had she been a consummate actress the entire time? I remembered moments where she had insisted that I pay for everything, claiming that real men support their women. I remembered how she always found excuses not to look for a better job or contribute to household expenses. I remembered the times she had checked my phone when she thought I wasn't looking, probably searching for evidence of infidelity on my part, while she was the one cheating. I remembered how she had gradually isolated me from some friends, claiming they were a bad influence or that they didn't understand us as a couple. The signs had been there all along. I had simply chosen to ignore them because I was in love with the idea of being in a serious relationship, of building a future with someone. I had mistaken her financial dependence for emotional commitment, her need for my money for genuine love. It was a costly lesson, but one I would never forget. That night, before sleeping, I took all the physical photographs of Natalia I had in the apartment and put them in a box along with sentimental gifts she had given me, letters she had written, and any other object that connected emotionally with her. I didn't throw them away because I wasn't acting out of hatred or resentment. I simply stored them in the guest closet, out of sight, preserved as evidence of a closed chapter of my life. Tomorrow I would face Natalia in that legal meeting with the same calm and clarity I had maintained since the moment I discovered her betrayal. The consequences of her actions were finally catching up with her, and I would be there to make sure she faced them completely. On Monday morning, the sky was gray, seeming to reflect the tension of the day. I prepared with the same care I would use for an important work presentation: dark suit, conservative tie, leather briefcase with all the necessary documents. Ricardo had advised me to arrive early to go over the strategy before Natalia and her lawyer appeared. Remember, he instructed as we had coffee in his office, maintain your composure no matter what she says or does. Don't let yourself be provoked. Any emotional reaction from you can be used to paint the narrative that you're unstable or controlling. Cold, professional, focused on the facts. That's our strategy. Natalia arrived 15 minutes late, accompanied by her lawyer, a man in his 40s named Ernesto Vega, who had that defeated expression of someone who knows they're defending a losing case. She looked haggard, her hair pulled back in a careless ponytail, no makeup, wearing clothes that were clearly not from her usual wardrobe of expensive brands. Our eyes met briefly as she entered the conference room. I searched for any trace of the woman I had loved, but I only saw a stranger who had shared my space for 3 years without me ever really knowing her. She sat across from me, the conference table creating a physical barrier that perfectly reflected the emotional distance that now existed between us. Ricardo opened the meeting with professional formality. We are here to discuss the resolution of the lawsuit filed by Ms. Morales and the countersuit filed by my client, Mr. Nunez. I understand the plaintiff wishes to propose terms of resolution. Ernesto Vega cleared his throat uncomfortably. Yes. After reviewing the evidence your client has presented, we believe it is in the best interest of both parties to reach an agreement that avoids lengthy and costly legal proceedings. Translation: Ricardo interrupted with a cold smile. Your client realized she has no case and wants to back out before the evidence of her fraud and betrayal becomes permanent public record during a trial. Natalia finally spoke, her voice breaking. Sebastián, please, it doesn't have to be like this. We can resolve this like adults. We are adults, I replied calmly. That's why we're here with legal representation, discussing the consequences of your actions. What exactly are you proposing? Ernesto took a document from his briefcase. My client is willing to withdraw her lawsuit if you withdraw the countersuit. Each party assumes their own legal costs. A mutual no-contact agreement is signed, and this matter is put to an end. That's convenient for her, Ricardo observed. But my client has incurred substantial legal fees defending himself against a frivolous lawsuit. Why should he simply absorb those costs? Because going to trial would be more costly for both of you, Ernesto argued. And because, with all due respect, the public exposure that a trial would bring wouldn't benefit your client either. My client has nothing to hide, Ricardo retorted. Unlike Miss Morales, who has a documented pattern of fraudulent behavior, including her previous dismissal for misuse of corporate credit cards. The mention of that incident made Natalia visibly pale. How? She began, but Ernesto put a hand on her arm to silence her. That information is irrelevant to this case, Ernesto tried. It's completely relevant, Ricardo countered. It establishes a pattern of conduct. It demonstrates that this was not an isolated mistake, but part of a consistent modus operandi of misappropriating other people's resources. The silence that followed was tense and prolonged. Natalia stared at the table, her hands trembling slightly. Ernesto shuffled his papers, clearly searching for an argument he couldn't find. Finally, Natalia looked up at me. What do you want, Sebastián? Tell me what you want for this to be over. The question was direct, desperate. I took a moment before answering, wanting to make sure my words were exactly right. I want you to take responsibility for your actions, I said in a firm but not hostile voice. I want you to acknowledge that you cheated on me, that you planned to defraud me, and that the consequences you are facing are a direct result of your own decisions, not my cruelty or control. Okay, Natalia whispered, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. I accept. I did all of that. I cheated on you. I planned to marry you for your money. I treated you horribly. I admit it all. Is that enough? It's a start, I replied. But I need more than words in this room. I need you to withdraw your lawsuit publicly. I need you to make a statement on social media, admitting that your accusations of economic abuse and manipulation were false, that you lived in my apartment out of my generosity, and that I had every right to end that arrangement when I discovered your infidelity. I need you to clean up the damage you did to my reputation with the same energy you put into destroying it. Ernesto intervened immediately. That's asking too much. A public statement of that kind would be humiliating for my client. Less humiliating than a public trial where every sordid detail of her betrayal becomes permanent judicial record, Ricardo countered. Less humiliating than sworn testimony from Rodrigo Mendoza, her accomplice, detailing how they planned the marital fraud together. Less humiliating than court documents that anyone can request, showing exactly what kind of person she is. My client is being generous by offering this option. Natalia sobbed openly now. I can't do that. My family, my friends, everyone would see that statement. I could never recover from that shame. And I had to face the shame of you rejecting me publicly in front of 30 people. I retorted without sympathy. I had to deal with your social media post painting me as an abuser. I had to endure your mother calling me, begging me to reconsider kicking you out, as if the apartment I bought and paid for completely was somehow yours by right. You faced each of those actions without a second thought. Now it's your turn to face the consequences. Ricardo added. We also have willing testimony from Patricia Rivas, her former co-worker, about the corporate card fraud incident. We have bank statements showing you never contributed financially for 3 years of cohabitation. We have the messages with Rodrigo. We have 30 witnesses to the public rejection. Do you really want all of that to come out in a trial? Natalia's resistance completely crumbled. And if I make the public statement, then everything ends? Then both parties withdraw their lawsuits. We sign a permanent no-contact agreement, and everyone moves on with their lives, I confirmed. But the statement has to be genuine, complete, and published on the same platforms where you defamed me. Not some ambiguous comment or a half-hearted apology, but a clear and direct admission of what you did and why I was right to end the relationship and remove you from my apartment. Natalia looked to her lawyer for guidance. Ernesto sighed heavily. It's your decision, Miss Morales, but I advise you to seriously consider this offer. If we go to trial, we will lose, and the consequences will be far worse than a controlled public statement. After several minutes of torturous silence, Natalia nodded slowly. I'll make the statement. Ricardo pulled out a pre-prepared document. Excellent. Here is the specific text you are to publish. You can review it with your lawyer. As Ernesto and Natalia read the proposed document, I watched their reactions. The text was direct, but not unnecessarily cruel. It admitted her infidelity, acknowledged that she had planned a fraudulent marriage, confirmed that she lived in my apartment without contributing financially, and retracted all her accusations of abuse or control. It ended with a statement that I had acted appropriately in ending the relationship, and that she assumed full responsibility for the situation she was in. This is brutal, Natalia muttered after reading it. It's honest, I corrected. And it's the only way this ends without going to trial. You decide. Natalia closed her eyes, tears still falling, and finally whispered, Okay, I'll post it. Ricardo prepared the documents for mutual withdrawal of lawsuits, the no-contact agreement, and the commitment to publish the statement within the next 24 hours. As we signed the papers, the only sound in the room was the scratching of pens on paper and Natalia's occasional sobs. I didn't feel triumph in that moment. I didn't feel vengeful satisfaction. I just felt like I was closing a door that I should have closed much sooner. When we finished signing, Natalia stood up to leave. She paused at the door and turned to me one last time. Was there any way this could have ended differently? The question caught me off guard. I thought carefully before answering. Yes, I said finally. If you had been honest from the beginning. If you had said you weren't ready for commitment instead of cheating on me. If you had had the respect to end the relationship before pursuing someone else. If you had valued the trust one gave you instead of exploiting it. There were many ways this could have ended differently. But they all required you to be a different person than who you are. Natalia absorbed my words with an expression of deep pain. You're right, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I wish I were different. I wish I were a better person. You still can be, I replied. But that requires taking responsibility and actually changing, not just saying the right words when it's convenient for you. This experience can either destroy you or transform you. You decide which it will be. With those last words, Natalia left the conference room, followed by her lawyer. The door closed behind her with a definitive sound that marked the absolute end of our relationship. Ricardo looked at me with approval. Well handled. You kept your composure, you got what you needed, and you did it without stooping to her level. That's a real victory. That night, as I was checking my email, the notification arrived that Natalia had published the agreed-upon statement. I opened Instagram, and there it was. A long post, no photos, just text. It read exactly as we had drafted it in Ricardo's office. I need to make this public statement to correct false information I previously shared. Sebastián Núñez was not abusive or controlling. I cheated on him with another person while living in his apartment without paying rent or contributing to expenses. I planned to marry him for financial reasons, not for genuine love. When he discovered my infidelity and my true intentions, he had every right to end the relationship and ask me to leave his property. The accusations I previously made about economic abuse were false, and I retract them completely. I assume full responsibility for my actions, and the consequences I am facing are a result of my own choices. I apologize to Sebastián for the harm I caused him, and I hope he can find happiness with someone who values him as he deserves. The comments on the post began to pour in immediately. Some were supportive. It takes courage to admit this. We all make mistakes. The important thing is to learn. But many more were critical. So you basically admit you're a gold digger. Poor guy. 3 years wasted on someone like that. And you thought this would make you look better? I closed the app after reading a few comments. I didn't feel pleasure in seeing Natalia be judged publicly. I simply felt that the truth had finally come out and that my name had been cleared. The people who knew me now had the full story, not just the manipulated version Natalia had tried to sell. The following days brought a sense of normalcy that I had forgotten existed. No legal drama, no harassing calls, no tense encounters. Just quiet, everyday life. I refocused completely on my work, where I received news of a possible promotion. I took up hobbies I had abandoned during my relationship with Natalia. I went back to the gym regularly. I restarted guitar lessons I had quit. I organized outings with friends I had neglected. Each activity felt like reclaiming pieces of myself I had lost without realizing it. My apartment, once filled with Natalia's things, began to feel truly mine again. I redesigned some spaces, got rid of that white sofa I always hated, reorganized everything according to my own preferences without having to consider anyone else's opinion. A week after the legal meeting, Fernando invited me to a dinner where I met his cousin Lucia, a 27-year-old woman who worked as a veterinarian. There was no pressure, no explicit romantic expectations, just a pleasant conversation with someone interesting. We talked about our jobs, our families, our experiences with past relationships. Lucia had recently gotten out of an engagement after discovering her fiancé had massive debts he had hidden. "It's strange," she commented as we shared dessert, "how you can live with someone, plan a future with them, and then suddenly discover you never really knew them." "Yes," I agreed, thinking of Natalia. "It's like you were in a relationship with an edited version of that person, and the real version remained hidden the whole time." Nothing romantic happened that night with Lucia, but we exchanged numbers and agreed to meet for coffee in the future. As I drove home, I realized that for the first time since the rejection at the restaurant, I had spent hours without thinking about Natalia, without mentally replaying what had happened, without analyzing signs I should have seen. I was genuinely beginning to heal, to look forward instead of back. The pain of the betrayal still existed. It probably always would on some level, but it no longer dominated every moment of my day. It was a scar I would carry, not an open wound that bled constantly. 3 weeks after Natalia published her public statement, I received an unexpected message from Rodrigo. "I need to talk to you. It's about Natalia. Please." I initially ignored the message, assuming it was some attempt at reconciliation on her part or additional drama I didn't need in my life. But Rodrigo insisted with another message an hour later. "It's not what you think. She doesn't know I'm contacting you. There's something you need to know for your own safety." The word safety caught my attention. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a public coffee shop the next day, making sure to inform Fernando where I would be and at what time as a precaution. Rodrigo arrived at the coffee shop looking considerably worse than the last time I had seen him. He had deep dark circles, an unkempt beard, and that nervous energy of someone who hadn't slept well in days. He sat across from me without ordering anything to drink, getting straight to the point. "Natalia is obsessed with you," he declared without preamble. After she posted that statement, I thought she would finally accept what happened and move on. But it's the complete opposite. She's worse. She checks your social media constantly. She drives by your neighborhood. She's tried to contact your family and friends. "She's scaring me, Sebastian. That's why I broke up with her for good. She's not well." The information unsettled me, but didn't completely surprise me. "Why are you telling me this? I thought you were her ally." Rodrigo rubbed his face with both hands. "I was, or I thought I was. But after everything that happened, I realized Natalia manipulated me just as much as she manipulated you. She sold me a story about being the victim of a controlling relationship, made me believe I was rescuing her, when in reality, she was just using me as a backup while she drained your resources. When everything blew up and the truth came out, I expected her to take responsibility, to grow from the experience. But she didn't. She's convinced that you're the villain, that it's all your fault, that if you would just give her another chance, everything would be perfect. We have a no-contact agreement," I reminded him. "If she's harassing me, I can take legal action." "I know," Rodrigo nodded. "That's why I'm warning you. She hasn't technically violated the agreement yet because she hasn't contacted you directly, but she's walking that line dangerously. 2 days ago, she confessed to me that she's been casually being in places where she knows you might be, hoping to run into you by coincidence. She talks about how if she could just talk to you face to face, without lawyers, you would understand her perspective. She's creating a completely alternative narrative in her head where you two are destined to be together, and all of this was just a misunderstanding that got out of hand." The description was disturbing. "What do you want me to do with this information?" "Be alert," Rodrigo advised. "Document any chance encounters you have with her. Inform your building's security. Maybe talk to your lawyer about getting a preemptive restraining order. I know it sounds extreme, but I've seen how she gets when she talks about you. There's an intensity there that's not healthy. And if she does cross a line, I want you to know that I will testify about her behavior if necessary. I feel partly responsible for how all of this played out. If I had known she was planning marital fraud, I never would have gotten involved. I thought it was an affair, not a criminal scheme." I appreciated his warning, Although part of me wondered if Rodrigo had his own reasons for wanting Natalia to face more consequences, perhaps related to how she had used him as well. That same afternoon, I called Ricardo to inform him about the conversation with Rodrigo. My lawyer took detailed notes and advised caution without paranoia. It's good to be informed, but we're not going to file for a restraining order based solely on third-party information about intentions. That could be seen as harassment on our part. However, if Natalia shows up at your building, your work, or any place where she is clearly seeking you out intentionally, document everything with photos, videos, witnesses. If she establishes a pattern of stalking, then we have grounds for legal action. He also suggested I update my building's security with a photo of Natalia and instructions not to allow her access under any circumstances, which I did immediately. The next few days passed without incident, making me wonder if Rodrigo had exaggerated the situation. But on Thursday night, as I was leaving the gym near my office, I saw a familiar figure waiting in the parking lot. Natalia was leaning against a car I didn't recognize, clearly waiting. When she saw me, she straightened up and tried to approach. "Sebastian, please, just give me 5 minutes. I just want to talk." I stopped at a safe distance, taking out my phone and starting to record. "We have a no-contact agreement, Natalia. What are you doing here?" "I was just passing by," she lied awkwardly. "This isn't your neighborhood or your gym," I pointed out. "This is harassment. I'm going to ask you once to leave. If you don't, I will call the police and use this video as evidence of violating our agreement." Natalia's expression changed from pleading to defensive. "I'm not harassing you. I can't be in a public parking lot. You can be wherever you want, except in places where you are clearly waiting for me or following me," I replied calmly, keeping the phone recording. "Rodrigo told me you've been planning these chance encounters. That's called stalking. You have 10 seconds to leave before I call the police." For a moment, it seemed like she was going to argue further, but she finally muttered something inaudible, got into the car I didn't recognize, and sped out of the parking lot. I immediately sent the video to Ricardo and Fernando as backup. "First documented incident," Ricardo wrote back. "If there's a second, we file for the restraining order immediately." The incident left me more disturbed than I expected. I hadn't felt physical fear of Natalia, but I did feel an unease about her mental stability and how far she might go in her denial of reality. That night I spoke with my mother about the situation. Teresa listened with growing concern. "That girl never accepted that her actions had real consequences," she observed. "In her mind, she's probably still the misunderstood victim. Be very careful, son. People who can't accept reality sometimes do unpredictable things." Her words resonated with Rodrigo's warning. I decided to be extra vigilant in the coming days, varying my routes, being aware of my surroundings, keeping friends informed of my whereabouts. The next incident occurred 3 days later. I arrived at my apartment after work and found an envelope under my door. It had no return address or stamp, which meant it had been hand-delivered. Inside was a handwritten letter from Natalia, 5 pages of cramped handwriting. I read it with a mixture of fascination and alarm. It was an incoherent mix of apologies, justifications, declarations of love, accusations of cruelty on my part, and pleas for another chance. Some paragraphs were lucid and emotional. Others were clearly the product of a mind that was rewriting history to protect itself from the pain of accepting its own guilt. "I know I made mistakes, but so did you," she wrote. "You were cold after you found my messages with Rodrigo. You didn't give me a chance to explain. You threw me out like I was trash without considering the 3 years we spent together." The letter continued in that tone for pages. At the end, it included a list of reasons why we should be together, which included things like, "Nobody knows you like I do," "We have shared history," and disturbingly, "You're used to supporting me, so it wouldn't be hard for you to continue doing so." That last line revealed so much about her mindset that I almost laughed if it weren't for how unsettling the situation was. I photographed every page of the letter and sent them to Ricardo. Second incident, my lawyer confirmed. "We're filing for the restraining order tomorrow." The letter alone proves she is not respecting the boundaries set in our no-contact agreement. The fact that she delivered this personally to your building means she knows where you live and is willing to come here despite the agreement. The request for a restraining order was filed the next day. Ricardo compiled the evidence: the video from the gym parking lot, the hand-delivered letter, Rodrigo's testimony about Natalia's stated intentions to seek chance encounters, and screenshots of messages she had sent to mutual friends asking for information about my whereabouts and activities. The judge reviewed the evidence and granted a temporary 30-day restraining order, during which Natalia was required to stay a minimum of 100 meters away from me, my apartment, my workplace, and any place where I was present. A full hearing was scheduled to determine if the order would be extended for a full year. Natalia was officially served with the restraining order 2 days later. Her reaction was exactly what I expected: a torrent of text messages from unknown numbers, saying I was overreacting, that a restraining order was excessive for someone who just wanted to talk, that I was cruel and unfeeling. Each message technically violated the restraining order, and Ricardo documented them meticulously. "She's building our case for us," he observed with professional irony. Each message is additional evidence that she can't or won't respect the established legal boundaries. The hearing for the extension of the restraining order occurred 3 weeks after the temporary order. Natalia appeared without a lawyer. Apparently, Ernesto Vega had dropped her case after she couldn't pay his ongoing fees. She tried to defend herself, arguing to the judge that her actions had been misinterpreted and that she was simply trying to get closure on the relationship. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, listened patiently before responding. "Miss Morales, you signed a no-contact agreement. You then proceeded to wait for Mr. Nunez in a parking lot, hand-deliver a 5-page letter to his residence, and send multiple messages from several different numbers. That's not seeking closure, that's harassment. The restraining order is extended for a full year. If you violate it, you'll face criminal charges." Understood. Natalia tried to appeal, claiming the order was unfair and that she had a right to express her feelings. The judge cut off her objections. "You have a right to your feelings. You don't have the right to impose them on someone who has made it clear legally and repeatedly that he does not wish for contact with you. If you need to process your emotions about this ended relationship, I suggest therapy, not harassment." This hearing is over. With the bang of her gavel, the 1-year restraining order was officially in effect. I left the courthouse feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because I finally had legal protection against Natalia's erratic behavior. Sadness because it had come to this, because a relationship I once thought was meaningful had degenerated into court orders and accusations of stalking. That night, Lucia, with whom I had had several casual dates in recent weeks, invited me to dinner. We had developed a comfortable friendship that was slowly evolving into something more. She knew about Natalia, about the betrayal, about the legal drama that had followed. "How do you feel after the hearing?" she asked as we shared wine at a quiet restaurant. "Honestly, relieved," I admitted, but also aware that this is a permanent reminder of how the wrong person can complicate your life in ways you never imagined. Lucia nodded sympathetically. "My ex still owes me $20,000 that I'll never get back. I had to accept that that money is gone, but the lesson I learned about setting boundaries and recognizing red flags, that's worth more than the lost money." Her perspective comforted me. We had had previous conversations about our respective experiences with betrayal and how they had changed us. We were in no rush to define what were developing between us. We both understood the value of taking things slow, of getting to know each other genuinely before making commitments. "You know what's ironic?" I commented. "Natalia did me a favor by rejecting that ring. If she had accepted, if we had gotten married, the damage would have been exponentially worse. Her betrayal saved me from a much bigger disaster." "Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are the best gifts in disguise," Lucio agreed. "We can only see it that way with enough temporal distance." The following months brought a peace that I had forgotten existed. The promotion at work brought stimulating new challenges and a team of talented people reporting directly to me. My apartment, once filled with painful memories of Natalia, had truly become my home, redesigned to my tastes and filled with new, positive memories. And my relationship with Lucia had blossomed into something genuine, built on a solid foundation of honest communication and mutual respect. So different from what I had had with Natalia that I sometimes wondered how I had ever mistaken that for love. One Saturday afternoon, as Lucia and I were strolling through the farmer's market, buying ingredients for a dinner we planned to cook together, my phone rang with an unknown number. I normally didn't answer calls from numbers I didn't recognize, but something prompted me to answer. It was Natalia's mother, Monica. Her voice sounded tired, defeated, completely different from the woman who had called months ago demanding I reconsider kicking her daughter out. Sebastian, I know you probably don't want to talk to me, she began, but I needed you to know something. Natalia is in intensive therapy. After the restraining order, she finally accepted that she needed professional help. Lucia looked at me with concern as I stepped away to take the call with more privacy. Why are you telling me this, Mrs. Monica? I asked cautiously. Because my daughter is finally facing the reality of what she did, Monica replied. Her therapist has made her see that her behavior with you was abusive in many ways. Financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, gaslighting when you confronted inconsistencies. Natalia is starting to take real responsibility, not just empty words, but genuine understanding of the damage she caused. I'm not calling to ask you to give her another chance or to lift the restraining order. I'm calling because, as her mother, I needed to thank you. The word, thank me, took me completely by surprise. Thank me for what, exactly? Monica sighed deeply. For setting boundaries that I never set. For not allowing her behavior to continue without consequences. For treating her like a responsible adult for her actions instead of a child who could do whatever she wanted without repercussions. I spoiled her, Sebastian. Her father and I pampered her. We gave her everything she wanted without teaching her the value of effort or respect for others. We created the monster that hurt you. And then, when she faced the consequences of her actions with you, my first instinct was to blame you instead of forcing her to look in the mirror. I'm deeply sorry for that. The apology was unexpected and, from Monica's tone, genuine. I appreciate you calling to tell me this, I replied honestly. How is Natalia now? She's working, Monica said. A real job, paying her own rent in a small apartment, living within her means. She doesn't have credit cards anymore because she learned she can't handle them responsibly. She goes to therapy twice a week. She's finally growing up. At 29, my daughter is learning lessons she should have learned at 19. But at least she's learning them. I'm glad to hear she's doing that work, I said sincerely. Everyone deserves a chance to grow and change. And you? Monica asked. How are you? I glanced over at Lucia, who was waiting patiently for me, holding a bag of fresh vegetables, smiling at me with that silent support that characterized our relationship. I'm good. Better than good, actually. I learned a lot from that experience about my own boundaries, about the warning signs I need to recognize, about the kind of relationship I really want. It was painful, but it was worth it if the result is being where I am now. I'm glad, Monica said, her voice breaking with emotion. You deserve to be happy. And Sebastian, one last thing. Natalia wrote a letter for you. Her therapist told her not to send it, to respect the restraining order and your need for space. But it's there, written as part of her healing process. If you ever want to read it, let me know. If not, that's okay too. You have no obligation to her. Keep the letter, I said after thinking. Maybe someday I'll be ready to read it, but not now. Now I'm focused on moving forward, not on revisiting the past. I understand completely, Monica replied. Thank you for listening to me, Sebastian. And thank you for being the man who had the strength to say no to my daughter when everyone else always said yes. It was the best gift anyone could have given her, even though it took her months to be able to see it that way. We ended the call cordially, and I returned to Lucia, who took my hand with silent understanding. Everything okay? She asked. Yes, I replied. I think finally, everything is okay. That night, as Lucia and I cooked together in my apartment, I had a revelation about how much my life had changed. A year ago, Natalia would have been in this same kitchen, probably criticizing my cooking technique or suggesting we order takeout instead of cooking because it was easier. Lucia, in contrast, cooked alongside me as an equal partner, sharing the workload, laughing when we made mistakes, celebrating when something turned out perfectly. There were no power dynamics, no unexpressed expectations, no manipulation. Just two adults enjoying time together, building something genuine, without games or lies. Can I ask you something personal? Lucia said as she chopped vegetables. Always, I replied. Do you ever regret how you handled the whole situation with Natalia? Kicking her out so abruptly, the legal actions, the harshness. The question made me pause and reflect honestly. No, I replied finally. Not for a single minute. Because if I had been soft, If I had been understanding, if I had given her another chance, she would have never faced the true consequences of her actions. She would have learned that she could betray me and still maintain the benefits of being with me. That wouldn't have been kind. It would have been enabling destructive behavior. Sometimes the greatest kindness is refusing to be an accomplice to someone's self-destruction. Lucia nodded thoughtfully. My therapist told me something similar about my ex, that by letting him get away with his lies and hidden debts, I wasn't being loving, I was being codependent. It was hard to hear at the time, but she was right. We shared a smile of mutual understanding, that kind of connection that only comes from having gone through similar experiences and coming out the other side wiser. The dinner we prepared was delicious. The conversation flowed naturally, and as we fell asleep that night in my renovated bedroom, I felt a deep peace that had been absent during all those months with Natalia, even the ones I thought I had been happy. 2 months later, at a family dinner at my mother's house, Teresa made an announcement. I've been organizing your father's things, she said, and I found something I think you'd want to have. She handed me a small box that I recognized immediately. It was my grandmother's engagement ring, the one my father had given to my mother more than 30 years ago. Your father always wanted this ring to stay in the family, Teresa explained. After what happened with Natalia, I put away the other ring you had bought. I thought maybe you'd want to consider using the family ring when you find the right person. If you find someone, of course. No pressure. She glanced meaningfully over at Lucia, who was playing with my nephew in the living room. I took the box and opened the lid. The ring was beautiful in its simplicity, a single diamond on a white gold band, worn smooth by decades of genuine love. It was perfect. Thank you, Mom, I said, my voice emotional. I'll keep it until the time is right. Teresa smiled and squeezed my hand. You don't have that look of pain in your eyes anymore, she observed. You've really healed, not just on the surface. That makes me happier than I can express. Your father would be so proud of the man you've become through all of this. Her words filled me with warmth. I had been through the fire and had come out forged into something stronger, wiser, more capable of recognizing and appreciating real love when it finally came along. A year after the rejection at the restaurant, exactly 365 days since Natalia had publicly humiliated me and I had made the decision to close that door forever, I found myself standing in the same Vetsa restaurant. This time I wasn't there for a failed proposal. I was celebrating a work anniversary with my team, a company dinner to celebrate closing the biggest project in our division. When the restaurant manager, the same one who had witnessed that painful scene a year ago, approached our table, he recognized me immediately. Mr. Nunez, he said with a warm smile. I'm glad to see you back under much happier circumstances. The circumstances have definitely improved. I agreed with a genuine smile. Indeed, the manager continued. Our entire staff remembers that night. We've talked about it many times. The way you handled that situation with such dignity and composure when it would have been so easy to create a scene, it was admirable. You taught us something about maintaining class under pressure. His words reminded me that the people who had witnessed my most humiliating moment had also seen my response to it, and that mattered just as much as the incident itself. That night, after the company dinner, Lucia picked me up outside the restaurant. We had planned a nighttime walk through the nearby park. As we walked hand in hand under the city lights, I told her about the encounter with the restaurant manager and about the reflection I'd had. You know what's the strangest thing? I said. I don't feel anger towards Natalia anymore. I don't feel pain. When I think about that whole situation, all I feel is gratitude. Gratitude? Lucia asked, curious. Why? Because her betrayal freed me from a life of lies. Because the consequences she faced taught her lessons that no one else had been able to teach her. Because everything that happened eventually led me to you. Lucia stopped and looked at me with those eyes that had seen my pain and my healing. Sebastián Nunez, are you saying that I'm a positive consequence of your worst experience? I'm saying that sometimes the worst things that happen to us open doors to the best things that are yet to come, I replied. I'm saying I wouldn't change a thing that happened, because changing that would mean not being exactly here, exactly now, with you. I kissed her under the stars, feeling that I had finally reached the other side of that storm. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just healed, but transformed into someone better equipped to recognize and value real love. Months later, I received one last message related to Natalia. It was from Rodrigo, a brief message. Thought you'd want to know. Natalia moved to another city to start over. She has a stable job at an event company. She's paying her own bills. Still in therapy. She asked me to tell you that she finally understands that the consequences she faced were fair and necessary. She doesn't expect forgiveness or contact. She just wanted you to know that your decision to set firm boundaries helped her more than anything anyone has ever done for her. Those are her words, not mine. I read the message with a mixture of satisfaction and relief. I hadn't been the villain of the story. I had been the person who finally said no to someone who desperately needed to hear that word. Today, when I look back at everything that happened, I see a complete story. A story about betrayal, yes, but also about boundaries, consequences, growth, and the human capacity to heal and transform. Natalia taught me what I didn't want in a relationship. The consequences she faced taught her lessons her privileged life had never taught her. And we both, in very different ways, emerged from that experience as more complete, more self-aware, more capable of building healthy relationships based on mutual respect instead of exploitation. Did you ever think that rejecting someone could be the best gift you give them? Have you had to set difficult boundaries with people you once loved? I'd like to hear your experience in the comments. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for joining me on this journey, for listening to the end, and for being part of this community where we share stories of overcoming adversity and finding justice. Your support means everything.